Hey everybody, in today's episode, it's myself, Benjamin B, and Heather. Heather comes on the show today to discuss about her recovery. She's clean 12 years. She got clean at 20 years old. It's rather remarkable. She did get clean in Long Island and New York. So we talk about, obviously, her recovery. She talks a little bit about her history and her using, but then we jump about halfway through into sobriety and what that has meant for her relationship with her sponsor, which she accredits a lot of her recovery to, and just all around being surrounded by good women, which ultimately led her to opening up Destiny Recovery Homes, which has been phenomenal. It's a female sober living here in Delray Beach, Florida. We cover a lot in there, the structure of it and who's the right person to be in there. And Heather talks a lot about her faith and every decision that she has made up to this point, 12 years later, being faith driven and how it's so important to her. We cover all that and more. Enjoy the show. Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Benjamin B.
What's happening, everyone?
And we have a lady by the name of Heather, right?
It's Heather. Yeah.
Got it right. Hey, listen, first things first, thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whichever one that you choose to use, and thank you for watching on YouTube. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us, info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message, right, peeps?
Yes, sir.
Right, Heather?
Yes.
Also, go to realrecoverytalk.com, and there on the homepage, you're going to see a little link that says schedule a call. All you have to do is click that link, and you get a free 10-minute or 15-minute conversation, potentially 30 minutes if you manage to get Ben on the phone, free consultation call, and we're going to go over your situation, your scenario, and see if we can help assist you in any sort of way. Also, go to realrecoverytalk.com/guides with an S, GUIDES. There you're going to see a catalog of guides that we've put together. We've handcrafted them, myself, Ben, and Dr. Tambini. They're assessments. So put your email in, click them, download them, and actually fill them out and see where you're going wrong in your life, or maybe you have everything going right. And either way, whatever it is, you can go back to the homepage and click that link and schedule the call with us, and we can go over the assessment with you and see if we can help you in any way. And we also have something that Ben would like to discuss. Ben, what do we have that you would like to discuss?
Let's talk about our community and the Sobriety Network, Tom.
The Sobriety Network. Tell us a little bit about it.
That is our Facebook group. So go in your little Facebook search bar, look up the Sobriety Network. It used to be Real Recovery Talk. We rebranded it recently.
Yeah.
We got a few hundred members in there. What?
We got close to 700, I think,
Is that
or
what it's at
600,
now?
something like that. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, lots of good experience, strength, and hope in there. People posting, commenting. Just feel free to post in there too. I want to remind people, doesn't just have to be us.
Yeah, I know. That's been a struggle. Like, I'm like in there last night and I'm posting a picture of me watching Monday Night Football. Like any Steeler fans here, and some of them, shout out to Ryan Ingram.
Yeah.
One of my fellow Steeler fans.
We were watching the baseball game.
Ooh.
It's been
that's rough. Sorry to hear that. So yeah, go to Facebook and type in the Sobriety Network. You only have to answer 2 questions. Yes, one of them is your email, and no, we're not going to spam you. We're going to send you updates of weekly emails of the previous podcasts that come out. And, I'll send you an email every now and again of some crazy thoughts that are going through my mind when it comes to recovery and sobriety. And so that's at the Sobriety Network. Last but not least, realrecoverytalk.com/services. If you would like to schedule a 1-hour call with myself, Ben, or Dr. Tambini, you could do that at realrecoverytalk.com/services. You have our undivided attention. We could talk about whatever it is that you want. If you want to talk about sports and how the Yankees are totally blowing it, you can talk about that, or we can talk about that. Or if you want to talk about the Steelers potentially going to the Super Bowl, we could talk about that as well. So you could do all that at realrecoverytalk.com/services. How are we doing, friends?
Wonderful. Really, really good.
Yeah. So thanks, Heather, for coming on.
Yes, my pleasure.
So Ben made this introduction. So Ben, just like we always do, when you make a introduction to somebody coming on the show, you get to do the introduction.
Technically, Destiny made the introduction.
Well,
Yes.
Destiny's not here, so
So Heather came by last week.
Yeah.
She has a women's sober home in what area? Boynton?
Delray Beach.
Delray. Delray. I'm sorry. We're right there. Same thing.
Yeah.
Delray,
and I live in
same
Boynton.
thing.
That's, yep.
Same place. But anyway, it's called Destiny
Recovery Homes.
Destiny Recovery
Homes, Inc. Technically,
All right.
it's a nonprofit.
So yeah, and it's always really cool to bring women on here that are obviously a staple in their community. Like just a few minutes sitting with Heather, like I picked up on the fact like she's actually worked a program. You could just tell she speaks the language. If you're in recovery and you've been around a while, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And to have women in recovery down here, especially opening up sober homes, is such an important thing. To be straight up, like there are tons of male sober homes.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
All over the place.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, women's sober homes are they're rare.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few good ones around.
Yeah.
But I can name them all on one hand, basically.
Sure.
But the good thing is, all the ones that are around have really good reputations.
Yeah.
So when the women get involved, they do it right.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice.
So Heather, it's nothing scripted. It's all organic. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know we established before we started recording how long you been clean.
I'll be coming up on 12 years in November.
Awesome.
November 26th. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Tell us where you're from, kind of a little bit of your story.
Sure.
And then we'll get into like the recovery aspect and the more about the sober home.
Yeah, I was thinking about it before I came in, and it is so important to talk about the beginning. To start at Destiny is most present, but there's so much that occurred to get to, being at the place where we have Destiny Recovery Homes. So I'm from New York. I got clean in New York. I'm born and raised in Long Island, and I got clean at a very young age. I got clean when I was 20, and my disease had taken off so strong from the moment that I picked up. It was on.
How old were you when you started?
I started when I was 12, but by the time I was 13, I was using pills regularly, and so
whoa,
yeah. So it was very took off because I can remember, and I talk about this often, I can remember that, it says in NA literature, and I'll be paraphrasing, it won't be exact, but for a period of time, the drugs, they did something for us. The substances did something for us. And I can remember when I'd taken a certain substance for the first time and I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, this is how I want to feel for the rest of my life. There was a relief that came. And so it wasn't social. It wasn't because of, we're about peer pressure, especially when you're picking up at such a young age. It was because it gave me relief. It gave me relief mentally, emotionally, and I didn't know at that time, but spiritually. And so that was what I chased. And I made a conscious decision I was going to chase that. And so from that moment, that's all that I did. I sought out that relief. And of course, that wears off. And it just became very, the obsession and compulsion. I was not confused when I got to recovery what powerlessness meant. You know what I mean? I wasn't confused.
We were talking about that yesterday, like the first step, so to speak. I'm like,
yeah.
I did my research out there.
Yeah.
By the time I got here, I was like, I knew I was defeated.
Some because I've either mentored or sponsored or just talked with women in women, right? My focus is always women. And so I've spoken to women in recovery that don't quite grasp that concept yet. But for me, my personal experience was I knew what powerlessness was. I didn't struggle with it at all when I got here. Like the idea of being so in the grips that you want to stop and you're on your hands and knees, looking at the substance, knowing you don't want to do it, but everything in you is compulsed to have to. That was very clear when I got here. And so my disease took me to very dark places. And as it does for many of us. But my story in particular is very jarring, and it was what was necessary for me. I still don't question what the depth that the disease of addiction can bring us because of how jarring my experience was. I had tried to get clean starting at 18. The physical withdrawal was just getting unmanageable. I was like, oh, I can't handle this. You need to get me some help. Put me somewhere. It was the physical withdrawal that I couldn't stand anymore.
What kind of pills in particular? I'm just curious.
Oh,
I'm looking at your personality. I'm like, I wonder what you.
Well, so what really brought me down was Xanax.
I was gonna guess Xanax. I should have thrown it out there.
I was pinning you as opiates.
Well, towards the end, nothing was off the table. And so that was a part of my experience as well. And it went as far as it could have possibly gone. And so
let me pause you here because
Sure.
I want to dive into this just a little bit.
Yeah.
How did you get introduced to Xanax? Is this out of bounds?
It's not. It is what it is.
Is it from a doctor?
No, it was not. It was I believe the first time I took it was my mother's prescription. And then that is involved, my relationship with my mother is a very important thing that I've had to focus on. The ride that I went with her, addiction, her story, my story and her story collided. And so I believe the first time was a prescription of my mother's.
Okay.
And so no, but I was not prescribed.
That's what I didn't know. I was curious to know if you got a prescription from a doctor.
I did not. And I never did.
Interesting.
Never did.
No, never did.
Because a lot of times people
stealing or buying.
People tend to gloss over.
Yeah.
Opiates. It's very open and very common knowledge that they could be very addicting, they could be very dangerous, and so on and so forth. But with benzos, there's more of this not as influential, I guess is the right way to put it. Like people don't hear lorazepam or benzodiazepine and think, oh my gosh, I'm gonna start shooting heroin or anything like that. Does that make sense? Like it's less like,
I feel like
in our space, obviously we know benzos are extremely dangerous,
right?
But for the common person, I've had so many conversations.
Yeah.
I meet with a family weekly.
Yeah.
And one of them, and now they don't abuse them. They take
Sure.
them, as needed, maybe once or twice a week.
Yeah.
Whatever. And have been on that regimen for the last 10 years. So that's fine, whatever. But I feel like people gloss over how addicting they are.
They are. And my perception on, prescription medication, it's just changed because it's had to. My personal recovery is very by the book, like we talked about. But when it comes to working with other people, you get those scenarios where there are people who are trying to find recovery or struggle with mental health, and those kind of medications come on the table, and it has to be, looked at. It has to be discussed, but they are incredibly addictive. But the point for me was it was always to chase after in an extreme manner at that time. So there was never any balance or any sort of doctors involved.
I will say this. The people, I grew up in South Florida, so we had the whole pill mill thing. And people think oxys and roxys down here and fentanyl when they think about the pill mills.
Yeah.
But Xanax was a huge part of it, too. It was nothing to get a prescription of Xanax with your roxys and oxys.
Oh, really?
And I will say this. My friends that were hooked on Xanax were the craziest of them all. Like, opiate addicts were nuts. People on Xanax are on another level. They just, because you don't know what you're doing, they black out all the time.
Correct.
Like, and I feel like, at least in my experience, people in Xanax get caught and suffer consequences very quickly in a lot of cases. They forget how many they ate, and then they end up in a situation
So dangerous.
where they just come to in jail, and
So
they're like,
dangerous.
how did I get here?
Yeah.
Dude, the time machine's already been invented. It's called Xanax.
Yeah.
Time just you don't know what happened. So like
Absolutely.
a lot of my friends where I saw situations where like they just did crazy off the wall stuff was a result of Xanax. So if you're like truly hooked on that stuff, there's generally events that end up stopping it. Unless you have like the stay-at-home mom type, because we get that a lot here, like the stay-at-home mom type that never leaves the house, doesn't attract attention to themselves. That's the other side of the Xanax thing too.
Yeah.
The last 3 years of my using, I legit do not remember.
Yeah.
Very small glimpses here and there, but all attributed to Xanax. And you see them cross-addicted with alcohol. If I wasn't drinking, I was eating Xanax. So.
Well, use the word cross-addicted for the
we've all had
listeners.
that experience of the
Benzos and alcohol are the only two drugs you can be cross-addicted to. And the definition of cross-addicted means you could substitute one for the other. It acts on the brain the same way. That's why they use benzodiazepines to detox people from alcohol. Technically, you can use alcohol to detox people from benzos. So
yeah.
So the only
not
drug-
recommended. We're not endorsing anything. Go to your local detox facility and seek help from them. None of us are doctors.
And if you need more information on that, go to services and call Dr. Tambini.
Yeah, realrecoverytalk.com/services, and she'll set you up.
Yeah.
So benzos and opiates, you started getting clean at 18, or tried attempting getting clean at 18.
Yeah.
So 2 years went by and you got clean. And so walk us through that.
2 years went by and I did not. You know, I tried from 18 to 20, coming in and out. And it was all coming to a head about how it really had nothing to do with the substances. I was trying to just see if I could, you know, fix that in some way. And it really became so apparent that I was using so heavily to escape from what I was experiencing, you know, the trauma, the pain, the trauma that had nothing to do with me, the trauma that I had, you know, had endured, placed on myself. It just compounded. And so I was becoming so aware that it really had nothing to do with the substance. It was way bigger than that. And I had to just be in such a place of surrender to be ready to take a look at what I was going to have to take a look at. And my experience was I had gone back out, and I don't call it a relapse. That's something that I want to talk about. I don't call it from that period of time that I had relapsed, even though I had bouts of being off of substances, because in NA literature, it says we have never seen a person fail. We've never, again, paraphrasing, we've never seen a person relapse who has worked the Narcotics Anonymous program. So was I really working the program to the best of my ability at that time? No. I was picking and choosing what I wanted to do. So I don't call it, sometimes people say, well, I relapsed. For me, that wasn't my experience. I just wasn't ready yet.
It's like AA, like the dry versus sober. Are you dry or are you sober? Sober means you're doing the work.
Yeah. Yeah. So I ended up going out on this, just set for destruction, really. And I ended up overdosing. But the people that I was with, they left me in a shopping cart. They were, afraid to call the police. And so they left me in a shopping cart in Deer Park Avenue in a King Cullen parking lot. And
what's that, a grocery store?
It's like a grocery store,
okay.
Yeah. Right off of DPA, like just out there.
This is in New York.
This is in New York,
okay.
Yeah. And, I don't know when they called the paramedics, how long it had been, but who called, whether they called or they didn't, or someone else saw me and then called. But my body was left in a shopping cart. And, I remember coming to at the hospital and being told I was hit with Narcan. So I've had that experience, which is, I know what it could have felt like if I would have just not made it. And so that's why my relationship with God goes so hand in hand with my recovery, because when I came out of that, it was very obvious that I had nothing to do with keeping myself alive. And that was the one piece that I didn't reject, because I didn't have a negative understanding of a religion or anything like that. I just didn't have really any concept of a relationship with God. So, which was good, because I've heard other people's experiences and I'm grateful for that. It was just, I was a clean slate. And so, it was very obvious that was something that I needed to chase after. And so I chased after that. The relationship with God is equally as as strong as I chased after my recovery from that moment forward.
Did you go to treatment? So you go to the hospital and you get, you come to and everything, okay, you're okay, you've made it through, they Narcaned you.
Yeah.
Did you end up in treatment?
I did. I ended up going into, not directly from there, I did have to go through the detox and then a crisis center. It was pretty much like where I went was what you guys talk about. I heard one of your podcasts, like there's 3 levels of care. You got this, and so where I ended up going was it's just a hospital detox. And then until treatment was available for me, I had to go to a crisis center. And a crisis center is really just a homeless shelter focused for people who a lot of the time are struggling with addiction. And so, yeah, it was intense. It was intense. I mean, I remember one of the guys there being like, the white girl there, she's not doing so good. Like, it was days before I, could get up and function.
Gosh. And where, I don't want to pry too much for information, but did you have anybody at that point in time in your life as far as family or support, or were you kind of just 20-year-old little Heather, doing her thing and you wound up in a crisis center?
So my father is stable. He was present, but from a distance. If I ever needed somewhere to go, I could go to his house. But was I going to get more than that? The financial stability and a place to know I could stay, that was there. But anything more than that, no. I was really on my own in a lot of instances regarding that relationship. And then my mom was still very heavily in the throes of her own stuff.
Yeah.
So, no, I was really sorting my way through.
So you've been at this pretty much on your own. Sounded like you were very left to your own devices.
Yeah, I was.
That's good. Good and bad.
Yeah.
But, okay, so we're at 20 years old and, you're at the crisis center, you go to treatment, now the recovery begins.
Yeah, and at that point, because something had clicked and I seized the moment of recognizing that it was a window of clarity that I heard people talking about, that it was a short window and I needed to jump on it. I jumped on it. And so I remember a conscious decision of making that wasn't of myself. When was I ever thinking in this way prior to that point? Everything was full of insanity. But I remember thinking things like, either I'm going to go and chase after my recovery, like my life depends on it, this way or that way. And there's nothing in between. And if I go that way, it's death in one form or another, physical, whether it be physical or spiritual. And so I made this conscious decision that I was going to go the other way. And, but I had to jump on it. And so I made decisions like I wasn't mandated to go anywhere, but I picked the place. And yes, I was making these decisions on my own. I picked the place to go to that was known for being very strict, but had great success. It was a women's program, a residential program. In New York, there are programs that last pretty long. That's a difference that I found here, is that there's some do offer longer residential, and I'm coming to learn more programs that do, which is so helpful because for someone like me, I needed to be in a residential program for quite some time. And this place did that. It offered that.
How long were you there?
I set my mind up for it that I was going to be there for 6 months. And I think I got really close to that. I was there for at least, right around 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
What'd you do when you get out of that place?
Well, when I was there, because I heard another thing that you had said, and I really appreciated it. Even though I didn't stay at 18, I did hear a lot along the way. And we take things off the shelf and we store things. I stored information that I had heard, because I did want to get better. I just didn't know how yet. It just wasn't the right timing. And thank God, my experience is that I lived through it being the right timing. But I heard a lot of things along the way. And so I knew that I needed to be in a 12-step fellowship. That was beyond a shadow of a doubt. And so it was a matter of getting really busy with doing the basics. And in the beginning, I really didn't know about Narcotics Anonymous. AA was just more prevalent, right? You just don't know that even exists. And I was familiar with AA, and so I started attending. And but I was going to AA and NA, and then I'm so grateful for the recovery that's in Long Island, New York, because people would have conversations with me. There was a women's meeting that I was brought to where I met my first sponsor, and women there would say things like, it doesn't matter which program you choose, but you have to choose one. You have to work one program, one set of steps with one sponsor. And then, people would say with one God of your understanding. And so I had people saying those kinds of things to me, and I would then make another decision to decide that. And I decided on committing myself to NA because it was what my experience of my addiction was identified most with that. So it just made sense. And I had found such camaraderie in the women's meeting that I was attending that it was, a done deal. So I got busy. I got involved. Found a sponsor, made that my home group. And it's not the conversation with my sponsor wasn't, it's none of it is easy. I was doing all of that, like you mentioned, very much on my own. With blinders on, incredibly anxious, incredibly uncomfortable, totally lost, but desperate to figure out how to stop using one day at a time. But I was praying to whatever it was at that time I didn't know that kept me alive, and to direct me like this. I could just remember, like, I had just tunnel vision. And then I ended up meeting my sponsor, asking this woman to sponsor me, and being really taught the ropes through the members. I was young, but I was like, I'm not here to make friends. This is my experience. I'm here to find people who can tell me how to live life. And so I stuck around with people who were older than me and who had more clean time than me. And
you're telling my story in a female form. Honestly, that's exactly how I was. I didn't. I actually told a couple people that were in my sober house that I was with,
that you weren't there to make friends.
Yeah, like, I'm not here to, one of my roommates, because he wanted to get into literally a fist fight with me over salami. Yes.
I believe
salami.
It.
I ate the last of the salami,
like
and
you didn't get slapped with a piece of salami.
So then we get into this, but anyways, I love that. I love that. You take that, you take control over what you have to do. I have a question for you though.
Sure.
So young.
Yeah.
And here's where I'm going with this, Ben, and I want you to chime in. Mm-hmm. We hear all the time, because we work a lot with young adults.
Yeah.
And they have everything handed to them, literally on a silver platter. Their parents will do everything for them. That, Johnny, he needs his car. I'm going to send him this. I'm going to send him that. I'm going to make sure that he has food and money in his account and da-da-da-da-da-da, which is okay, so long as it's not to the point of enabling. But you find yourself at 20 years old, clean, making these decisions for yourself. 20 years old, you're still a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, you really are.
Mm-hmm.
What were you doing in terms of the life skills side of it? Did you go and get your own apartment? Did you live in sober living? Did you live with other women? Were you working? Like, how did you establish the sobriety thing? We know you went full bore.
Yeah.
You were intact there. Mm-hmm. Nothing was going to deter you from that.
Yeah.
But then you have every other aspect of life. And at 20 years old in Long Island, New York, I imagine you can, you got to find your way. What did that look like? So
my situation is very interesting. There's this dynamic that's kind of contradictory, because I did have financial stability. My my father could provide for me. But at the same time, because of the way that my upbringing was, mentally, I was very used to figuring it out and surviving. So he was there, but my parents were split up, and I went to live with my mother. And so I did have the ability to have things if needed. But I was so used to surviving because of the way that my upbringing was. So that mentality kicked in. And at that point, I didn't really depend on him until later. I'm reminded by my sponsor that I would work off of a very small amount of money and just make it work. I was hooked into food stamps and healthcare and all of that through the state, and I utilized it. I didn't have to, but I utilized it because I was on a track that was different than what my past was offering me, and I wanted to keep moving forward, forging through. And so I did. I went through residential, and then I went to sober living from that point. I do believe that my father helped me with sober living because they're cash pay, right? But actually, one of the homes that I lived at did accept vouchers from the first home that I went to did accept vouchers through, assistance, government assistance. And so I utilized that, and maybe my dad threw in a little bit. And then from there, I ended up, but I was okay with working with very little. I didn't need my focus was not to go out to hang out and do what other people were doing. So I didn't need much financially. I was okay with working with very little. I was used to having sort of that I know now, a mindset that I can survive, I can do it. I've had to let go of that quite a bit as the years have gone on, that I don't have to do it on my own, that I don't have to figure it out, that I shouldn't figure it out all on my own. But I was during that. And then also, like I said, then I had my sponsor, and I had other people in the fellowship that were a wealth of knowledge, and they would direct me, and I would be willing to take direction from the people that knew, the people that I was meeting in recovery. They would tell me direction, and I would take it. So went to sober living, and then I eventually ended up moving out of sober living and lived with my sponsor for a period of time, and we shared an apartment, and that was an awesome phase of my recovery. That was.
What do you got, Ben?
There was a lot there, a lot. So because Tom, you told me to chime in. So one of the things that was going through my head is, don't steal the opportunity from somebody in early recovery to overcome challenges on their own. And you mentioned you got the food assistant, the vouchers, all those things.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And I'll speak for myself, where when you have very low self-esteem, like I did coming into early recovery, for me to be able to say that I accomplished something as simple as buying my own groceries meant something to me, versus hey, mom and dad threw me $100 and I went to Publix. You know what I mean? There was this sense of shame that came with being given things, at least for me. Mm-hmm. And I think in a way it was I was proving to myself that I could do these things on my own, so to speak. And it sounds very similar with you. You took advantage of that stuff. When I was in Minnesota, I didn't get sober up there, but, made attempts, used WIC, all that stuff. The methadone program. I don't advise methadone, but, I used government assistance for that. And just, I was utilizing what resources were available. Keeping in mind, also the mindset of an alcoholic and drug addict, at least for myself, I don't want people taking advantage of those systems. Yeah. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with temporarily utilizing them. That's what they're there for. Yeah. Our clients here apply for food stamps too. Mm-hmm. And I've sat down with clients and they're I'm not applying for food stamps. That's below me. I'm is it though? Mm-hmm. You're in an institution right now. Mm-hmm. The pride and ego, I
can see that.
Bring down the wall, man. Yeah. This is where you're at. You're a junkie. Mm-hmm. This is where drugs and alcohol brought you to. Step one, and apply that.
Yeah.
But don't take somebody's opportunity to surmount these obstacles. Like Tom was saying, send Johnny his car. He won't be able to get a job with that. Yes, he can.
Yeah.
You know, that let them figure it out. Let them prove to themselves that they can do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the enabling thing is like when you're taking that opportunity from them to succeed on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with helping too. It's knowing when and how to help.
Yeah.
And that's why you need guidance from people. I am curious because just I've heard both sides of this. I've heard experiences like yours, like you just shared, but I've also heard the other side of it where people argue against it. You moved in with your sponsor. Mm-hmm. A lot of times that's referred to like as a dual relationship. Mm-hmm. You know, another example of that is like a sponsor hires somebody because they own a company or something like that.
Like a conflict of interest.
Yeah, they can occur. If you don't mind me asking, like, what led to that? What positives were in it? I'd like your insight on the experience because you said it was wonderful.
Yeah, it was. But then again, there was such a gap of, you know, my sponsor and I had a difference in age. You know, she was in her late 40s, 50s, and I was younger. So there's a gap there. And so our mindset, you know, our mindset was different based off of just age. That was big. But also, no, it was very good for me. I think the conversation came about because the sober living that I'd went from one to another, and the second one that I went to was just a little iffy. And so it was like she just had offered it because the sober living that I was at, and it was the second one, and wasn't really going to go to a third. It was just a little iffy, and it worked well. No, I never had any issues with that. I could see that probably occurring if a person and their sponsor are closer in age. But for her and I, it wasn't a problem. She assisted me, but I also was open to allowing assistance further than just 12 steps also. I didn't have a problem with that. Like, for instance, I didn't know very basic things about how to live life. I didn't know how to have a routine even after treatment. I didn't know how to have a routine. I didn't know how to structure my day. And so she taught me those things, and I was open to it. You know, how to make a bed, stuff like that. I still needed to be being very regimented with that to get it to the point where it was habit and my new lifestyle. So I was okay with her coming into those places where I've noticed some people in recovery, you know, even with the stories that they have, we can become closed-minded to accepting help past a certain point. And that just wasn't for me. That just wasn't the case for me.
Yeah, that's interesting that you brought that up, and I wanted your take on that because I think this is one where it comes down to practical experience. Like my experience personally, I would never let a sponsee move in with me, but I've had experiences in my recovery where, like, for instance, there was a guy that hit me up one night, and he's like, Ben, I need some money to get some dinner. I'm like, why don't you just come by my place and I'll cook you dinner? Mm-hmm. And he was like, no, I want money. And I fed him dinner at my place. I'm like, if you're really hungry, you'll eat this spaghetti with me.
Yeah, like it's your child.
And then,
you'll eat if you're hungry.
Then he's like, do you mind if I crash out here? I'm like, no, that's cool. So he got like real comfortable real quick. One night, and the very next day, hits me up. He's in Lake Worth and out of gas at the gas station. He's like, Ben, I need you to drive down to the gas station in Lake Worth and fill up my tank for me. I'm like, what?
Ooh.
He's like, I thought you were somebody in recovery that cared, and you're full of shit. And I'm like,
what?
Yeah, dude.
Do I know this person?
No. He ended up going off on me.
Yeah.
You know, so like in my experience, like for me, I wouldn't do it today because of expectations on either end.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and that was just one of my experiences. But I also want to point out, too, like I'm a big history buff with AA.
Yeah.
They used to allow people into their home.
All the time.
They did.
And that was the mindset that my sponsor had. Yeah. She has 40 years clean today, you know, coming up on 41 years clean. Not only that, but her family was used to doing that because of, you know, the ministries that they were a part of and just the way that the legacy that her family had, they were always welcoming people in. I didn't know that, but that's where she comes from. And so it was a unique situation. And then I've been able to be taught that. I was taught that and was witness to that, and that can become an option. Not all the time. I could see that with certain people, certain sponsees, or certain people that I help, that no, that wouldn't be on the table. And then there's every once in a while, there might be that kind of situation where you could see it being possible.
Someone special in a way.
Yes,
yes.
And that is the history where people were being brought in from, the street, welcomed onto people's couches, and had those open arms.
If you're going to extend that kind of help too, you have to be willing to pay the consequences also. Because, for instance, in the long version of Bill W.'s story, they have a book called Pass It On, which is like it's the long version history of AA and Bill W. But he talks about, like, in the big book talks about it, where a guy ended up committing suicide in their home. And the details of it, he actually went downstairs and sucked the exhaust on the furnace and asphyxiated himself in that manner. Also, another guy, it's going to sound funny saying this, but stole Bill's sport coats and pawned them. I don't even know what a sport coat is.
It's like a suit jacket.
But,
stole his Jordans.
Yeah, exactly. So there it is. For today's time, stole his Jordans. We had that happen here once.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Jordans are always a problem. Leave your Jordans at home if you're going to treatment.
Yeah.
But point is, as a sponsor or somebody extending help, if you're going to extend that help, be willing to pay consequences for it. Like, give it knowing it could turn out negative. And if it does, you have to be okay with that. And that's where doing your own work on you comes in.
I absolutely agree. And that's what I run in, that's what I run into. Yes, I ran into that with sponsorship, but I run into that most today with, helping women in the way that I do now. Is I have to be realistic about the fact that this may not work out. And how am I going to react? How am I going to show up in going into it, which I've had to readjust my perception on, going into it prepared for that to happen, sometimes almost more than the change will occur, because we're here to plant seeds, and plant seeds. I can't predict that what I offer is going to cause that person to completely transform and change. Very well may not. I'm here to plant seeds and be, obedient to what God has me doing in that moment. But yeah, now more than ever, I have to be open to that it may not go well.
Yeah. So I want to take the rest of our time and discuss what you're doing now with Destiny Recovery Homes.
Yeah.
Just in full transparency, we've had so many people. There used to be a saying down here when you would pick up your chips at AA. Get your white chips, sign a surrender, blue chip.
Best blue you'll ever do.
Best blue you'll ever do, green, whatever.
Like basic text blue.
And then you get up to 9 months in yellow chip, and the saying was fire your sponsor and open up a halfway house.
Oh.
Because that's what a lot of people were doing back in the day. This goes back 10, 12 years probably.
Yeah, sure.
So we've had a lot of people come to us with these grand ideas of opening a sober home. And I firmly believe they think that they're going to make a ton of money and blah, 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 which you don't. What makes you want to do this? Like what inspires you to do this? Because you're different in the sense of you decided to do this at 11 years clean or whatever it is.
Yeah,
later on versus 11 months.
Yeah.
So walk us through that.
Well, I'd always known that when I was taught about service through Narcotics Anonymous, I started to really see that at some point that my life would continue to be a life of service in one way or another. And so I knew from early recovery that I would be doing something to help others. And I just continued to trust the process of how that was going to unfold. And I had, like I was sharing with you guys, I had been involved in churches and doing and serving and working in that capacity. And then I had gotten some experience on the tech level and had those experiences. But my life was so wrapped up in my family and my children that was really my primary focus. But again, still all with the mindset of serving, of being selflessly serving, even at home. And knowing that was the season that I was really pouring in. We pour in every day, no matter what, as parents, selfless. I pour in every day selflessly as a parent, but with my children being, the babies being younger and the older children being school age, that was just what I was enthralled in then. And then I started to really continue to pray about it and pray about it and pray about it. And God prepared me in different ways. For instance, I didn't know how it was going to happen. Like I said, I didn't come from South Florida, so sober living wasn't a big deal in New York. It just really isn't. It's not that big of a deal. And so I was praying about it. And then I lived in Minnesota, and there too, like, it's just not that big of a deal. You don't hear about it like you hear about it here. So, but I did start to grasp that having housing could be the direction that I would go in. For one reason is because, my family, the legacy of my grandfathers is that he's always had affordable housing. And spiritually speaking, I noticed that there may be, not definitively, but there may be a connection to what he had built and what I might do. And so I put myself in a position, well, maybe I'll start out by helping people through his nonprofit, which has nothing to do with people in recovery. And so I got my real estate license and wanted to be, more skilled and regarding the real estate world, and just open and waiting for whatever opportunity came my way. And then I ended up making a connection with someone who her desire was to open up a women's home, and and then I realized, okay, well, maybe that's what it is. Maybe you're leading me to, at some point there will be a home. And I realized how realistic that concept could be. But then that deal didn't go, that wasn't the deal. So then I continued to walk along and trust the process and pray and continue to be diligent in what I could and focus on real estate. And then we got down to Florida, and I ended up being given an opportunity where it really was just, I couldn't have made it up. It just kind of landed in my lap, like, hey, this is here. This is the opportunity for you. Do you want to start get involved in the sober housing world? And so all of my decisions are so faith-led by taking the next right step that, God is directing me to. And so now Destiny Recovery Homes is that as well. If I don't want to be I was just having this conversation with my husband, I don't want to be in the sober living business if I don't know that God is constantly confirming that that's what I'm supposed to be doing. That's where it always comes back to for me. So that's just where he's brought me to. It wasn't something I really pre-planned much at all. I had ideas and concepts and knew the general base was that I always want to help people. I even struggled a little bit with, well, do I really want to help people in addiction, in recovery? Because my life is so filled with recovery. I'm an active member. I sponsor them. Do I want to also, like, as far as work goes, be in that as well? But that's where I've been brought to. And now it's at a place where I just have so much experience to offer that, and I have at this point, it is confirmed that that's where God wants me. He wants me to have this home, and that's where it's at. So
this is wild. I'm like, this ties into some of what we were previously talking about. You said before you listened to the episode where we were talking about faith and all that.
Yeah.
You said earlier, probably like a half hour ago, along the lines of when you first got sober, you were praying to something you didn't even know what. Mm-hmm. To now you're sitting here like, where God wants me.
Yeah.
That journey that so many people go on. I think it just hits home the point on the last few episodes of like, just just start somewhere and see where that spiritual belief takes you.
Yeah.
And spiritual experience takes you, I guess you could
Absolutely.
say.
You know, I have dreams. I am the kind of person, right? And I'm sure you guys can understand, especially with what you've created and what you've built. I have a lot of dreams. I have a lot of ideas. I would love to see it be Destiny Recovery Homes or me be able to reach many, many people. That would be wonderful. But I've had to, as I've started this business, I've had to realize that I have to make decisions on what's presently in front of me. I have to stick to the basics. I don't want to leap too far out of what the dream is, that I overlook the basics of who I need to be serving, what's working for my business and what isn't.
Can I ask a question
Sure.
to tie into that? What are some of the challenges that you face? Because you said you got to handle the stuff right in front of you.
Yeah.
You know, you got the dreams of what have been some of the unforeseen challenges from any aspect of opening a sober living, maybe that you didn't expect or that you knew to expect, and it's something different experience in it.
So, and because it also does tie into my faith and having to come down to making sure that my decisions are based on reality, is that when women come into the home, the dream is that everybody that enters, we were talking about this before, everybody that enters the door is going to experience, I'm going to be able to have a part in showing them, guiding them to, just from them being under that roof to a totally transformational experience. And what I've come to find, one of the challenges is that that's not always the case, is that the women that enter through the doors, some women, thank God we've had a very high success rate of not using. But we've run into other situations where the person just was not ready. They weren't ready. Or there were mental health challenges that I had to navigate through by redirecting them to somewhere else that might have been a better fit to make sure they're getting all the care that they need. But the challenge of accepting that at this stage, I have to do what I can and provide what I can and be grateful for the times when I do see a woman come in that has that total transformation, but still move forward, even if that's the one and not the many.
That sounds like we have to recognize this all the time because we got bleeding hearts.
Yeah, so do I.
I have to remind myself on a daily basis, I can't help everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to, but could we, for instance, make Rock bigger and add more beds? Yes, but would the success rate be the same? I can guarantee you not. Like the bigger, you lose control of it. You put more drug addicts and alcoholics together in early recovery and it spirals out of control. Where I'd rather do quality over quantity and be okay in my heart knowing we helped a handful of people versus hundreds and hundreds this year.
Yeah.
Because you would fall short.
Yeah.
Or attempt to help hundreds and hundreds. I don't think it can be done as good.
How many beds is it?
Right now, so the way that it was set up was that my mother-in-law, her name is JoJo, she was because we started the nonprofit together, and because we knew the house manager role was so important of setting the standard, she actually lived in the home for when we first started it, so that things could be really running like a top. And so she's lived there for 6 months, and this weekend actually we're making a transition again, something that has been prayed about, where we've made the decision that there's another woman that is capable of filling the house manager role, and so it went from 4 beds to now there will be 6.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into this because you just
We
said
don't have that much time.
I know, but we got to touch on this part. We talked about this before we started recording, and I've never heard this before. You just said your mother-in-law was in the house. Okay. please explain to the listeners. I've already gotten a little taste of what's coming.
Sure.
Your relationship with her and what happened as a result.
Sure.
This is wild, Tom. Did you hear this?
I don't know.
Oh, dude, I've never heard this before.
Yeah,
listen to this.
It is a really wonderful story, and it does tie into everything about just going out and taking just trusting, like blind faith, just putting the next right foot in front of the other. So if we reverse back to that phase of when I was, in residential and at that women's meeting with those women who were saying the things I needed to hear, I ended up finding a sponsor there, had blinders on, and I just found someone who had a decent amount of clean time. They were visible, they were active, and I had asked this woman to sponsor me. And it turns out that she ends up I worked with her for about a year. We did steps, and then I ended up meeting her son, and her son is my husband today.
Oh yeah, I heard that part.
Dude, that is wild. Because I'm sitting here thinking to myself, if
so she went from sponsor to mother-in-law and to mom. She's mom. Sponsor to mom to grandma of my children, and so we, of course.
Wow,
that's so crazy. Because dude, I'm thinking to myself, if I did step work with my sponsor, especially a 4th and 5th step, and they know about the things I've done, they'd never let me marry their daughter. Look at it's really cool at the same time. Hearing it as an outsider, because it clearly worked.
Yeah.
Or works, whatever the dynamic is. It's like your relationship with your mother-in-law must be amazing because
it is good.
She literally knows everything about you.
Yeah,
pretty
she does.
much.
She does. But again, we learned over the course of that relationship, we learned how to have boundaries and change through time periods where we didn't know how to have proper boundaries, and then learned how to have boundaries and change hats completely and shift and grow through that. So it took navigating how to have boundaries regarding that, but we learned that and we instilled that, and it works. It is really cool because you don't know which came first, right? Was it of course, there was so much growth that I wouldn't have gotten if I wasn't working with her in particular. But then also, just like the picture is so much greater. The picture is so much greater for what's in store. That when I was asking her to be my sponsor, I would have never imagined that my children that would then lead to meeting the father of my children.
That's so what, I'm trying to picture. I'm just curious now. I'm being nosy. I'm like, the first time you saw him, were you like, whoa?
The first time I saw him, it was one of those situations where
son is hot.
Yes, absolutely, hands down. It was one of those instant things. Yeah, but it didn't happen for a little while. But yeah, it was immediate. It was very immediate. It was wonderful.
That's cool. That's a good story.
That is a good story. I've never heard anything like that.
See, these 12-step programs have a lot more to offer you but it starts with your sobriety.
Yeah, it does. It does.
So as far as Destiny Recovery Homes, you mentioned nonprofit, so it's donation based.
Yeah, so that allows us to be able to take donations. We haven't really delved into the world of grants yet, but if we ever did, then we can accept grants as well. It was just something that I'd always tied together when you're doing, having a business that has altruistic in nature. I've always known for it to be nonprofit. Like I said, my grandfather's, one of his businesses was nonprofit. So it seemed like it made sense. We haven't yet really reaped the benefits of what a nonprofit can offer. I take that back. We are able to receive donations, and that way, I'm working on a deal. I thought I was going to start 2 homes, but going back into what you were talking about, God really has realigned the business plan, where I believe decisions haven't been made 100%, but I've been able to come into a donation where I'll be able to purchase a home. Right now, I rent the home that I'm in. I'll be able to purchase a home. And so I'll probably end up shifting things where we just work with that one that's owned and then take it from there. Because I thought, well, I'll keep the rental, I'll get the second. But I'm just seeing with business that, Shark Tank 101, you don't want to start expanding further than where you're at. So that's the plan. So yeah, we can get donations. There's a world
so
of
if somebody
grants.
if somebody wanted to donate, I mean, we have a lot of listeners. If they love the mission or they want to learn more about it, is there a place that they can donate?
Yeah, you would contact, we have a website. You can contact me directly, and the donations would just go straight into the business account because it's managed, in a certain particular, our business account is managed in a particular way, where all the funds are accounted for. So it's not a personal account; it's a business account that gets budgeted and handled in a certain way. So donations get accounted for in a certain way.
What's your website so the listeners know?
So it is really long. It's still a GoDaddy account. So I probably shouldn't drop that, but we have. That's under the official one is under construction. But you can go on Facebook and look up Destiny Recovery Homes, me personally, and that's linked to that business page is linked to my account, Heather Eason. And then from there, you could see the website. It's, it's still a GoDaddy.
So you can go to Facebook and type in Destiny Recovery Homes.
Yes.
And, inquire, if you want to donate.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, it was a pleasure having you on.
Yes, thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
It's always good to see women in particular, because like Ben was saying in the beginning, men's sober homes, they're a dime a dozen. They're all over the place. Mm-hmm. But women's, it's hard. We've only had one other female sober living, I believe, that's come on, and that was Roseway. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah.
Good people.
Roseway is very reputable. It's a very reputable women's home.
What's their names again?
Ariel and
Megan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry.
I was drawing a blank, dude. You put me on the spot.
Yeah, I know.
Ariel and Megan, if you're listening, sorry.
We've sent them quite a few people, so it's always good to have somebody else in terms of female sober living in the mix. And how much is it a week?
It's $300 a week.
$300 a week. Mm-hmm. Is there upfront costs?
So that's one of the things so to move in, it's technically $300 a week, $300 for your admin fee, so $600 total. But because we come from, like you were talking about bleeding hearts, we have been known to work with whoever we can work with. Yeah. Especially in the beginning, we try to find any way that we can assist.
And in Delray Beach, I mean, that's, South Florida in and of itself, recovery capital of the world.
Oh, you should mention that. It's there's a clubhouse.
Yes.
Am I allowed to mention the clubhouse? Yeah, it's called Crossroads.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can find it on Google Maps. I can mention it. There's a big 12-step clubhouse that has multiple rooms, multiple meetings going on at the same time. AA, NA.
Yes.
I think they have like eating disorder meetings. They have all kinds of meetings. Mm-hmm. But it's only a couple blocks from your house.
Yeah, we're directly off of the same road that Crossroads is on, so you make a left at our Crossroads, you can walk, 5 minutes down the road and you'll hit our house.
And a ton of opportunity for employment in that area, which is very important.
Is that like Atlantic Avenue?
Yeah, Atlantic and the other road that Crossroads is on.
Because we see that a lot of times where people, they don't think things through, just due to lack of experience. They'll put a sober home in some random place.
Yeah, no, it has to be well
where
that's part of the business plan.
Nowhere near employment, nowhere near meetings. Like, it just doesn't work. They don't think that stuff through.
I've had people call who are like, I want to move in just because it's close to Crossroads. You do. That's a part of it being a business, is you want to make those smart decisions.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Heather. Thanks again. Again, go to Facebook, Destiny Recovery Homes, if you want to learn more. And Ben, any final thoughts?
No, thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
All right, that is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you for tuning in. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us, info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message. That is it. We will see y'all later.